Good day, GAMIthon participants. The theme of today's short lecture is responsible food consumption. I'm Shan Shan from the Hong Kong Baptist University. As participants of the GAMIthon, I'm sure that you are well aware of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Among the 17 goals, this GAMIthon in particular aims to address goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. Today, I'm going to talk about how food consumption and production can be carried out in an environmentally responsible way. I'm sure all of you agree with me that food waste is no good. Growing the food, producing the food, but eventually it is not consumed but thrown away. Well, this is no doubt a waste of resources, time, and money. Thus, whenever edible food is wasted, that means the environmental impacts of food production are created, but nobody benefits from it. So, if wasting food is unwise, why is food still being wasted? I will share with you a few of my insights later. But first, let us look at the global situation. Now, when we look at the global situations, you will find two terms, quite related. Similar to each other, but they are not exactly the same. One is food loss, the other is food waste. They are not the same, they are not interchangeable, okay? So food loss refers to the decrease in edible food mass throughout the supply chain that specifically provides edible food for human consumption, whereas food waste is a subset of food loss, because food waste is food loss that occurs at the end of the food chain, that is during the retail and final consumption stage. Okay, food waste is a subset of food loss. So when we talk about food loss, that actually include food waste, but more often than not, food waste is easier to measure and therefore are more frequently mentioned. Now, as an ordinary citizen, it is very difficult to get accurate information on global food waste situations. Fortunately, United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, regularly measures global food waste for us. So we can just refer to their reports to get to know the most updated situation. In 2019, UNEP estimated that around 931 million tons of food waste was generated, and out of which 61% of the food waste actually came from households. Well, what exactly does that mean? Is big figures. I'm sure everyone interpreted as a large quantities of materials, but what exactly does that mean? Now, in the year 2019, out of all the food that we produced in that year, a whacking 17% was wasted. If food loss and food waste were a country, it would be the third largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, just after China and the United States. Now, one more interesting finding from the United Nations Environment Programme's report was that, contrary to common beliefs, per capita household food waste generation is found to be broadly similar across country income groups. In fact, if you believe that this estimate is basically accurate, you can even conclude that lower middle income countries produce more food waste per head than higher income countries. So it seems that being wasteful is no longer a privilege of the rich now. So much so about the global situation. Let us turn to Hong Kong. Now, in Hong Kong, food waste is regularly measured by the Environmental Protection Department of Hong Kong. Here, I have collated 19 years of data on food waste for you. So throughout these 19 years, now the latest figure that is accessible, available, was the year 2020. So for 2021, we don't have any data yet released by the government yet. Okay, So in this chart, food waste can be traced from two sources. One is the domestic, as in the case of the UNEP reports from the domestic sector, whereas the CNI represents the commercial and industrial sectors, like the restaurants, the offices. All right, so they represent another source of food waste. Now, it is quite obvious that throughout the 19 years, despite some of the slight ups and downs, we have been producing a lot of food waste every day. How much was that produced in the year 2020? We produced 3,255 tons every day. And this is just the food waste. So what did each of us contributing to the situation in that year? Well, if we average out for each of us in the population, that means each citizen in Hong Kong in that year, on average, was disposing 330 grams of food waste just from your household setting. Okay, so starting from today, make notes of how much food waste is disposed by you every day. Then you will know if you are producing above or below this average figures in terms of food waste. So in short, food waste at the consumer level is everybody's problem. So, well, the Hong Kong government is well aware of this problem. It's not that they don't know. They didn't know that it exists. It is aware of this problem long before. So starting since year end 2012, the government set up the Steering Committee on Territory-Wide Food Waste Reduction Campaign. So this is a committee. And one of the deliverables of the committee was to launch a voluntary Foodwise Hong Kong campaign. 1.5 years later, the government published a plan called a Food Waste and Yard Waste Plan for Hong Kong, in which a goal to reduce food waste disposal by at least 40% in the year 2021, by the year 2022, which is this year, was set. But from what you have just seen, I'm sure that you know, and the government knew, that this goal is not going to be met. And therefore, the government replaced this goal last year with another goal, which was to reduce waste requiring landfill to zero by the year 2035. That means the government no longer have a specific waste reduction goal for food waste. Instead, they set up a goal for all the waste, municipal solid waste, all the municipal solid waste for Hong Kong by the year 2035. Now, other than setting up goals, there are 3 more worth mentioning approaches adopted by the Hong Kong government to deal with the food waste problem. First, the government encouraged NGOs to apply for ECF funding to carry out surplus food donation programs. Second, the government also encourages, and in some cases even subsidizes, the separate collection of food waste. And the separately collected food waste will then be sent to the OPAC 1 in particular, for conversion into energy, which is biogas. Okay, and the biogas can be used to produce electricity instead of landfilling it. And that's why they propose a zero landfill goal instead. According to the Yard Waste and Food Waste Plan, there should be 3 OPACs to be set up. Currently, OPAC 1 is up and running. OPAC 2 is under construction. OPAC 3 has only the feasibility study finished. And the third approach, other than setting up the goals for reducing food waste, is to promote other food waste treatment technologies other than the anaerobic digestion food conversion technology that is being used in the OPAC. And this initiative is mainly financially supported by the Recycling Fund. So an example of other technologies that can convert food waste into useful products is to make use of black soldier flies to convert the food waste into animal food and fertilizers. Now, I hope that by now you are convinced that there are a lot of food waste in both Hong Kong and around the world. But before I talk about the solutions, it is essential to understand where the food waste comes from. Otherwise, you don't know what solutions to use, isn't it? So, depending on the stage in the supply chain, the causes of food waste generation vary a lot. At the consumer level, now this is the finding from my previous student projects. So my students sort the waste that they collect from the offices of BU and some other areas, and they find that actually quite a lot of food were thrown away even before it was expired. Okay. And they also found that there are food which may not have an expiry date attached to it, but they were not finished, but end up in the rubbish bin. A lot. Why? Why was the food purchased and yet not consumed? Well, based on a lot of studies findings, it seems that poor taste is actually a major reason. I just don't like the food. Well, if you don't like the food, why do you buy it in the first place? Well, that's interesting. Other reasons for unconsumed food, unfinished food, but end up in the rubbish bin include over-purchasing, lack of purchasing plan, poor food storage, poor food management at home, or even too polite to reject an unwanted gift. So, in short, irresponsible consumption it is. In 2013, well, quite a long time ago, I had the privilege of analyzing the waste collected from the legislative councillors' offices. That was a very interesting study with very interesting and insightful findings. What we found was, at the time, in the worst case, up to 16% of discarded waste from the offices of our honorable legislative councillors, they were usable or edible food, 16%. So as far as food waste is concerned, it does not really matter who you are, whether you are just a humble citizen or an honorable decision maker. You are still responsible for generating food waste unnecessarily. So what about the producers? Now, producers have different reasons in generating or throwing away excessive amount of food. A less well-known reason was that especially for the upmarket food and catering outlets, like the five-star hotels, they adopt very strict cosmetic standards. So what does this cosmetic standards, what is the result of adopting such high cosmetic standards on food? That means food like this, a carrot like this, right? Actually, it is very, very artistic, I would say. But it is artistic to look at, but no good to serve on the plate. So a carrot like this does not meet the cosmetic standard and will be thrown away by the five-star hotels. Other reasons may include inappropriate storage at any stage of the production, or the staff that exercise poor inventory control. That means they do not necessarily strictly adhere to the first in, first out approach, or food is just not handled by them in a proper and hygienic manner. So when it is discovered they are not properly handled, they have to be thrown away. One other reason is related to the catering service design, that is the serving design of buffet. Because in most restaurants, when they prepare for the buffet, the food for their buffet setting, they can prepare up to 30% more than the pre-booking essentials to cater for the walk-ins and customer satisfaction. So that's why, at the end, they have a lot of food left unconsumed. So they just have to throw away. Last, I'm going to share with you a few of my thoughts on how to solve such a problem. I will talk about it, I will discuss it on two fronts. One is the policy side, the other, they are the technologies. Now, on the policy side, I think the most effective policies would be to launch a weight-based or to enact a weight-based food waste charge policy or law. A good example would be Jeju. Now, I'm not too sure if you have been to Jeju. When COVID is over, then I would encourage you to find a chance to go to Jeju, and you will see a lot of these orange machines. You will find a lot of these orange machines in the residential areas of Jeju. Now, this is actually a food waste charging machine, food waste disposal and charging machine. All you need to do is, if you are Jeju citizens, if you have a piece of food waste, you tap your money card, cash card, or Octopus card. Well, the equivalent of Octopus cash card is Octopus class card in Hong Kong, to the machine, and then the door will open. You put in your food waste. They will tell you how much it weighs and how much the charge you need to pay, and you finish your job. The more you throw in, the heavier the food waste, the more you pay. So this is one way to encourage people to change their behavior. Similarly, at the restaurants level, if you are restaurant owners serving buffet, you can also charge the amount of leftover food on the plate of the customers. The more is left over, the more is charged in addition to the cost of the buffet. So in that case, that will also encourage your customers not to take excessive amount of food but unconsumed. The second policy group is some concerns about how to reduce the risk of food donors. In fact, food donation is a very risky behavior business in Hong Kong. You may not know that. This is because in Section 7 of Chapter 71 of Laws of Hong Kong, which is called the Control of Exemption Clauses Ordinance, it stipulates that even if a disclaimer is issued by, say, a food donor, Mr. X, but if death, personal injuries, other damages or loss is resulted from this food donation activities of X, such as when someone consumed the surplus food donated by Mr. X, but this person gets sick, which is a form of personal injury, after eating the food, then that person, the sick person, the victim of the so-called victim of this food donation activity, can actually bring Mr. X to court, and quite likely he or she will be successful in holding Mr. X liable for compensation in court. As a result, I really think that we need a policy enacted by the government to indemnify food donors of the damages from the food donated, and or on the other hand, or at the same time, offering tax benefits for food donating businesses. The third group of policies that I think will be effective is to encourage the marketing of unappealing food, or to gather all the unappealing food, those not meeting the cosmetic standards or the food, and gather them together and transfer them to the underprivileged instead of throwing them away in the landfill. Another group of solutions it circles around the technologies, and there are three types of technologies that I think will be useful. First, if technologies can be developed so that there can be packaging that absorbs the ripening hormones of fruit, that will be very useful in prolonging the shelf life and the storage period of perishable fruit. The second group of technologies include widening the variety of food waste that can be converted into animal food, because currently only a limited categories of food waste or types of food waste, especially those with high protein level, can be converted into animal food, whereas those food waste with high fat contents, they will not be very suitable to be converted into animal food. So if we can have technologies that can accept, that can make use of a larger variety of food waste, that will be very helpful. The third type of technology is about IT technologies, the most trendy technologies that we are talking about right now. If we can have smart fridges, all right, smart fridges that can remind consumers that certain food will be expired in the next 7 days in your fridge. Well, in that case, that will remind the consumers to cook that food first, right? Smart shopping trolleys can also be developed, as they can remind shoppers that they are probably buying too much in one go. Surely, if there is a free food saving app that gets installed in your mobile phone, then that can also do the job of reminding you, oh, certain food is towards approaching expiry date in your fridge, or you have been shopping food too much, buying food too much in the last few days. Okay, so information technologies can also do wonders to solve the food waste problem. At the end, I would like to end my short lecture with a quote from the president of the Arizona State University. Actually, I modified it a little bit. Food sustainability, like democracy, is not a problem to be solved, but rather a challenge that requires constant vigilance. So it requires your constant vigilance, not just a one-time effort. So thank you.